Montevideo, December 1980. A humid South American summer. The Estadio Centenario is buzzing. Brazil are in town, so are Italy, West Germany, Argentina, and the Netherlands. Maradona is announcing himself to the world, Socrates is captaining a new-look Brazil, and West Germany are turning the team hotel into Oktoberfest. And somewhere in the midst of all of it, in a country fresh off voting down its own dictatorship, a football tournament kicks off that manages to be both celebration and smokescreen. This was the Mundialito, the Little World Cup. Officially, it was a tribute to the past. Unofficially, it was a curious blend of political theatre, nostalgia trip, and an anthem to give New Order a run for their money. It was FIFA-backed, militarily endorsed, and largely forgotten. And yet, for 2 strange weeks in the middle of the South American summer, Montevideo became host to footballing royalty. Let's rewind. In 1930, Uruguay hosted and won the first FIFA World Cup. 50 years later, the Uruguayan FA decided that a golden anniversary deserved a golden celebration. And so, with FIFA's backing, they came up with the idea of the Copa De Oro, the Gold Cup, or more commonly, the Mundialito, the Little World Cup. It would be a 6-team invitational mini-tournament, staged entirely in Montevideo, to crown the Champion of Champions, a compact homage to the World Cup, but with a twist. Entry was limited to those who had already won it. This meant Uruguay, Brazil, Argentina, Italy, West Germany, and England. Or so they wanted. The English were dragging their heels. The problem was, teams in England's first division weren't exactly happy to let their top players shoot off to Uruguay's big birthday. To be fair, the tournament was set to take place right in the middle of the domestic season, and Uruguay wasn't exactly a short trip over the channel. The FA and Football League workshopped a few ideas, like asking each team from the top flight to relinquish one player, or sending Port Vale instead and hope nobody noticed. The solution the FA eventually landed on was to pay homage to the 1930 World Cup and decline the invite altogether. The Netherlands were invited instead, not because they'd won the World Cup, but because they'd come close, twice, and created a style of football inspired by a parquet court song. On the other hand, FIFA president João Havelange needed no convincing. Not missing a chance to slap the FIFA logo on something, the Mundialito was granted official status, a gleaming new trophy was minted, a mascot was designed, and even a theme song was commissioned, the not-so-subtly named Uruguay Te Queremos Ver Campeón, or in English, Uruguay, we want you to be champions.
Uruguay, te queremos ver campeón.
This walked so Badil and Skinner could run. But the Mundialito wasn't just about nostalgia and disco bangers, it was also about politics. Uruguay, in 1980, was under a civic military dictatorship. The economy was crumbling, thousands were in prison, hundreds of thousands more had fled to avoid persecution. In November 1980, the regime had tried to push through a constitutional referendum that would have cemented their grip on power. But the people voted it down. Over 57% said no, and the dictatorship lost the national vote. Awkward. The Mundialito then served another purpose. Distraction. An international celebration of footballing glory. A reminder that Uruguay had once stood atop the footballing world, and that it could again. The national team were put in a pre-tournament training camp for weeks. The people were encouraged to get swept up in it all. A short, sharp dose of national pride, just what the generals ordered. The tournament was split into 2 groups of 3. Group A featured the heavyweight of Uruguay, Italy, and the Netherlands, and Group B the slightly heavier weights of Brazil, Argentina, and West Germany, with the top team from each group progressing to the final. The tournament kicked off on the 30th of December 1980. The opening game was Uruguay versus the Netherlands in front of 65,000 fans. The Dutch turned up underwhelmed, under strength, and underslept due to jet lag. Uruguay, by contrast, had been in full training mode for weeks. They won 2-0. Next up, Italy. The match had goals, brawls, and a referee losing control of everything. After 3 red cards and a minor international incident, Uruguay won 2-0 again and booked their place in the final. The Netherlands and Italy met in the group's final game. It ended 1-1 in front of about 15,000 people in a half-empty stadium, which made sense given that very few European fans had made the pilgrimage to Did you see that? The Dutch coach resigned as soon as he got home, which showed you how much of a laugh he had, while Italy went back to the drawing boards to plan their revenge, which, to be fair, they pulled off rather well in 1982. For Uruguay, though, mission accomplished. They reached the final with 2 wins, 4 goals scored and 0 conceded. Owners of Uruguayan assets in the fantasy Mundialito game were no doubt delighted, much like the home crowd. Meanwhile, in Group B, Argentina had brought a strong squad, including 9 of their starting 11 from the 1978 World Cup final, plus the addition of some 20-year-old named Diego Maradona. Wonder what happened to him. Brazil was in transition. Tele Santana had taken over and was beginning to mould a team that would, by 1982, would enchant the world. West Germany, meanwhile, turned up with a firm commitment to sampling Montevideo's nightlife. Germany's manager would later describe how players broke curfew and snuck out to nightclubs, generally treating it like a stag. In Group B's opener, Argentina beat the Germans 2-1 on the 1st of January 1981. It was West Germany's first defeat in 2 years, and I'm sure the New Year's hangover had nothing to do with it. The Argentina-Brazil game was spicy. That bloke Maradona gave Argentina the lead with a goal that would have looked at home in a Best of Diego VHS. Brazil equalised via another banger, and the game finished 1-1. But then, things descended. A clash between Jose Daniel Valencia and Paulo Isidoro escalated into a full-blown brawl. Uruguayan police even entered the pitch to break things up, and presumably to get a few autographs while they're at it. The final group game saw Brazil needing a win over an already eliminated West Germany by 2 goals or more to reach the final. The Germans scored first. The Argentinians were loving it. Then Brazil scored 4 times in 28 minutes. The Argentinians were less loving it. The game finished Brazil 4, West Germany 1. Argentina's coach accused the Germans of not putting a shift in, but rather than there being any kind of conspiracy, it's likely that they just enjoyed the hospitality a little too much. I mean, even the broadcasters were referring to Germany as Ale-mania. Either way, Argentina were out. West Germany were on a flight back to Europe, presumably via the Carrasco International Airport Weatherspoons. And so then, to the final. Uruguay versus Brazil, a sequel to the 1950 World Cup final 30 years on. 71,000 fans packed the Centenario. The game itself was tense. Sure, this wasn't the actual World Cup, but try telling that to the Uruguayan fans in attendance, or the generals in the VIP box. Uruguay struck first through substitute Jorge Barrios. Brazil equalised via a Socrates penalty. Then, in the 80th minute, Valdemar Victorino headed home the winner. Uruguay 2, Brazil 1. The same result as the 1950 World Cup final. When the whistle blew, the crowd erupted. Uruguay were, once again, champions of the world. Kind of. The players leapt into the moat that surrounds the Centenario pitch, which was very considerate seeing as it meant the kitman now had one less job to do. The scenes in Montevideo were euphoric. After years of seeing their football fortunes wane, Uruguayan fans relished this moment. Newspapers proclaimed Uruguay champions of all world champions. But, unfortunately, they wouldn't get a chance to defend their credentials as best in the world. Uruguay failed to qualify for the 1982 World Cup. They would rebound, though, to win back-to-back Copa Americas in 1983 and 1987. As for the politics, the Uruguayan regime got their trophy, But the propaganda victory they'd hoped for didn't quite land. In fact, it arguably backfired. The broader context meant the Mundialito kicked off in a very different political climate than it was designed for. During the final, chants of "the dictatorship is going to fall" could be heard, but in Spanish obviously. The Estadio Centenario, dressed for propaganda, became a theatre of dissent. The regime limped on until 1985, but it was living on borrowed time. Despite its official status, the Mundialito isn't celebrated on par with, say, their World Cup wins or Copa America titles. Perhaps because it was a one-off invitational, or perhaps because it's awkwardly associated with the dictatorship years. Today, the tournament itself holds as much international legacy as Davor Suker's time at Arsenal. The tournament wasn't repeated, FIFA barely mentions it, and somewhat fittingly, the trophy itself is hidden away from the public in some Santander bank vault. As for the idea of repeating the tournament, there was indeed chatter about holding another Champions Gold Cup for the World Cup centenary in 2030. The main issue being that there is an actual World Cup taking place in 2030. The solution? Play the opening 3 games in Uruguay, Argentina, and Peru, obviously. In the end, the 1980 Mundialito was yet another blend of sports and politics, nostalgia and opportunism. It had the grandiosity of a World Cup anniversary, but also the not-so-subtle undertones of dictatorship propaganda. It produced some memorable moments: Uruguay's gritty triumph, Brazil and Argentina's impromptu brawl-for-all, West Germany's big night out in Montevideo. Yet, it's seldom talked about, as if the football world collectively moved on and swept this mini World Cup under the rug. Uruguay can still cherish it, in a modest way, as a golden moment when they reminded the Giants that they can still punch above their weight. For the rest, it remains a half-forgotten tale.